to talk to you tonight about ice safety. My name is Tim Moore. I'm with owner of Tim Moore Outdoors. I've been a guide since 2005. I've been ice fishing in this area for more than 30 years. I'm pro staff for Ice Team, Clam, Vexilar, and Mackie Plastics. This being early December, I thought it would be a good time of year to talk about ice safety, especially when we're getting some ice up north and nothing down here yet. People are chomping at the bit. This is the time of year when people do stupid stuff because they want to get out on the ice. So we're going to talk about ice safety. I'm going to talk tonight about some of the hazards, the safety equipment, and recovery techniques, and some prevention. We're going to go through each one of these individually. So I'm going to ask who here has fallen through the ice. Have you ever fallen through the ice, even up to your knee while you're ice fishing? If you've gone through the ice, up to your waist, and 8 feet, 2 feet, doesn't really matter. I guess the bottom line, the reason I'm asking the question is because nobody ever expects to fall through the ice. Nobody ever plans to fall through the ice, and nobody ever thinks it's going to happen to them, and which is one of the most common reasons that people fall through would be complacency. Ice thickness is almost never consistent. It can go from a foot thick to just a couple inches and just a yard or two. Last year I was fishing on Lake Winnipesaukee and I was on 4 inches of ice, and we had a pretty consistent 4 inches of ice. And I was walking along drilling holes about every 10 feet, and I stopped because the color of the ice changed all of a sudden. And I checked again, and I had gone from 4 inches to 2.5 inches in 8 feet. So that drastic of a change can happen. Just multiply that. You can go from a foot of ice down to just a few inches. A lot of things are going to determine the ice thickness, temperature, snow cover. The longer that the ice has been covered with snow, and the more snow you have, the more insulated it's going to be, and the less it's going to freeze. So you might have areas that are frozen and they get snowed on, and those areas won't freeze as quickly, and then areas that were open water, all of a sudden it gets cold again, and they'll freeze up, and they'll freeze really thick. So you can have these areas that you wouldn't expect to be thick. They'll have nice thick ice, and areas close to shore will have very thin ice. Current obviously affects ice thickness. More current, less thickness. It just doesn't freeze in moving water. And weeds, believe it or not, once the ice forms and the weeds covered with ice and snow, they begin to decompose. And if you know what decomposition is, it's a combustion reaction. So it actually produces heat when they decompose, and it won't melt the ice, but it will slow the formation of ice in those areas. So heavy weed beds are places to watch out for. Level Lake is one place that is 12 feet of water out there this spring, and there were weeds right up to the surface of the water. So it would be interesting to see what the formation of ice is like at the edge of that weed line, on either side of that weed line. These are the recommended guidelines that the Minnesota DNR recommends for their ice. And this is kind of relative though. They say 4 inches to walk on, which I will agree with, and 5 inches for a snowmobile or ATV. Minnesota gets really cold really fast. So they form 5 inches of good solid black ice. New Hampshire, it gets cold, and then we get a thaw. And then it gets cold again, and we get a little bit of snow, and then we get a thaw, and then it gets cold again. So we have this really, really poor formation of ice. We have layering. We'll have a couple inches of good ice, and then we might have an inch of bad ice, and then a couple more inches of good ice. So 5 inches in New Hampshire I don't consider enough to drive a machine on. I go with 8 inches. 12 inches is good for a car or a small pickup, and 15 inches you want to drive a truck on it. So be it. I won't drive my car on the ice. I don't care. I just don't do it. It's just a good practice for me. 60% of all fatalities occur in some sort of vehicle, in a car, on a snow machine, on an ATV, some sort of vehicle. If you insist on driving on the ice, leave your windows open. They used to tell us, I remember when I was a kid, they would say, if you're in a car and it goes through the ice, don't try to get out until you hit the bottom, if the car sinks through. They don't tell you that anymore because what they're finding over the years is that the vehicles are sinking nose first, and then they flip over on their roof and make it almost impossible to get out. And even if you do get out, there's so much silt that you can't see where you're going to get up to the hole that you just broke through. So now they tell us, leave the windows open and get out. The minute the vehicle goes through the ice, just get out. It's all your priority. Get another vehicle to pull it out because you're not going to drive out anyway, so you might as well just jump out. So these are some of the hazards, most common hazards, major hazards that are associated with ice safety. Cold shock response, hypothermia, and drowning. But is hypothermia really a concern that we want to have as far as ice safety goes? I'm not really sure. Let's look at it. Hypothermia is when the body's temperature reaches 95 degrees. And they used to tell us for years that, you know, oh, you have 60 minutes max and you're dead. You gotta, hello folks, welcome. What's happened over the years is there's been a scare tactic and a lot of bad eyewitness reports. Basically, they get these timelines because people see somebody go through the ice and that person dies, and they think, well, they just say, well, he went through the ice, and 5 minutes later, he just sank. And well, it's probably because the person had a heart attack. So they immediately say, oh, they've used all these eyewitness testimonies to come up with these estimates for hypothermia. In the last 10 or 15 years, they've done a lot of studies. Now, this 40 degrees gives you 30 minutes, expected time of survival, 90 minutes. A lot of that stuff's actually a lot greater than that. Anybody have any idea how long before hypothermia sets in? Well, 30 minutes. It takes at least 30 minutes for hypothermia to set in cold water. That's with winter clothing on, because believe it or not, it does add insulation even though you're in the cold water. 3/4 of the people asked say that they think hypothermia sets in within 15 minutes. Now, if you thought, now let's back up. Hypothermia, that we've been told for years, is the leading cause of death when people go through the ice. So if you're told that you're going to become hypothermic within 15 minutes, or you believe that, and hypothermia is the cause of death, what do you think is going to happen when you fall through the ice? You're going to freak out. You're going to panic. You're going to hyperventilate, which is normal, but you're not going to be able to stop it because you're going to think you only have 15 minutes to get out of the ice or you're dead. And that's not true. There are 4 phases when you go through the ice: the cold shock response, cold incapacitation, hypothermia, and then the last one is relatively new, Circum-Rescue Collapse. I actually learned about this in a roundabout conversation with a biology instructor at UNH who taught me what this was. I'd never heard of it before. Cold shock response lasts for about a minute, and then it's over. And then you get into cold incapacitation, which can occur anytime for 5 to 15 minutes after you fall through. And that's just your muscles are they're just not gonna work the way you want them to. Hypothermia, and then Circum-Rescue Collapse. So the cold shock response is gonna last about a minute, maybe 2 at the tops. And what you're gonna experience is a gasp reflex the minute you fall through. You're gonna look like this guy with clothes on. You're gonna gasp whether you like it or not. This is where flotation, or keeping your arms out and keeping your head above the water, comes in, because you're gonna gasp whether you're above the water or whether you're under the water. And if you're under the water, you're gonna gasp with your lungs full of water, and that's why most of those people that fall through are never seen again. They don't die of hypothermia. They gasp in water and they drown. Then you're going to hyperventilate. Both of these are going to be uncontrollable. They're both going to happen involuntary, and they're both going to subside within about a minute. So you're also going to experience a rapid heart rate, high blood pressure. You're going to experience vasoconstriction. Your blood vessels are all going to constrict. Your body's just going to tell it to shut down the blood flow to your arms, and you just need to wait that out. If you have any kind of a heart condition underlying or known, you're at high risk of a heart attack or cardiac arrest when you go into cold shock response. If you don't remember anything that I said tonight, hopefully you will. Remember that it'll pass. That's the only thing you need to know when you go through the ice, is that feeling you feel, that sense of panic and that gasp and that hyperventilation. In about a minute, that's all going to pass, and you're going to start to be able to breathe a little more normally, not normally. Your muscles won't be as tense. You'll be able to start to swim a little bit. So when you go through, just try to remember to relax, and remember that you have more than 15 minutes to live. It's not that old myth of I'm going to die in a few minutes here. Cold incapacitation, like I said, it occurs between 5 and 15 minutes. It's just your nerve endings and muscles responding to the cold. I mean, nothing really works well when it's cold. And when you jump into 35-degree water or fall into it, your muscles tense up and your nerve endings freak out and nothing really works well. But that always gets worse, never better. So this isn't like the cold shock response where you're going to start to feel a little better in a minute or two. Once your muscles begin to decline and you start losing function of your arms and legs and your breathing, expect that to get worse. So form some sort of a plan the minute you go through the water. If you swim constantly after falling through the ice, you will become incapacitated in about 5 minutes. They've done numerous tests on this, and 90% of the people are incapacitated in under 5 minutes if they try to swim constantly the whole time. So what they suggest that you just stay calm and you form a plan how you're going to get back up onto the ice and think about what you're actually going to do. Hypothermia usually occurs in about 30 minutes. Young and old people, it happens quicker. Thin people, it happens quicker. It probably happened really fast to me. Your body mass, the higher your body mass, the slower it's going to cool, so you'll have more time there. That's all a factor in that. Water is an excellent conductor of heat. Does anybody have any idea how quickly your body cools in cold water? 25 times faster than it cools in the same temperature air. So if you're in 35-degree water, it's going to cool 25 times faster than 35-degree air. That's pretty fast. And the more you struggle and the more you swim, the faster you're going to experience hypothermia. Alcohol speeds the onset of hypothermia. That's all I'm going to say about it. Circum-Rescue Collapse. This was one of my most favorite topics in this whole seminar because it's real. It's real, and it's fascinating to watch people overcome incapacitation and work through it and to get to safety, and then they just fall apart. They collapse. I watched one video of a woman who jumps in frigid water and she manages to swim all the way to shore, which is 3 times farther than they expected her to swim. And the minute her feet hit the rocks, she collapsed, rolled over on her back and said, "I can't move." She couldn't even drag herself up onto the shore. And these things happen basically in succession. Your body has just gone through this unbelievable workout. It has done something that it never has to do. It's been pumping out adrenaline, epinephrine for however long you've been in the water. And as soon as you see a rescuer, or you get rescued, or just after you've been rescued, you go through this mental relaxation, and the epinephrine shuts down, and you all of a sudden you vasodilate because you're relaxed, so all of your arteries just instantly open up, and you're flooded with all this blood flow, and you're extremely susceptible to either passing out or having a heart attack.